Okay, welcome everybody. I did hit the record button so that you know you are being recorded for posterity. That usually helps everybody maintain the right frame of mind as we do these things. But just as a way of announcement, we've got some special guests. David Alarcon is on from Chicago. Munisupport is his organization. I think I've said that right, have I? David. And Erika Bennett from Brixmor, the property management company at Sunray. And Senior Commander Kurt Hallstrom is on with us today as well, which is great. It's always great to have you on the show, Senior Commander. And we'll do kind of as we get started, one of the first things we'll do is just a police update. So that's something we'll do right after we do introductions here. Okay, so here comes the agenda in the chat. So there you go. You can kind of scroll up and see everything we've got in store. All right, it's 2:32. We will have some other folks jumping on as we get going here, but let's go ahead and get started. We've got a couple other folks who are planning on being on. While we get going, let's do our police update first before we do introductions. Just as a way to kind of build out the gallery before we get to the introductions piece. We like to do that with your cameras on. When you're on the meeting, just have your mute on in general, unless you're speaking. And if you'd like to speak, you can kind of wave your hand at the camera and Darren and I will be looking for you. Or you can go ahead and, like I said, drop a question in the chat. We'll be watching for questions in the chat so that we can kind of do that. Oh, here's something I could do straight away. Let's go ahead and thank ISABA sponsors, and I'll share my screen and we can do that. Okay, so thank you so much to our annual sponsors. Here's the kind of the look we've got for that. Thanks to Ideal Printers and DB Creative. Darren Varley's on the call. Harrington Langer and Associates, State Farm, Juan Cervantes State Farm Insurance, that's right over at 94 and Ruth, right by Sunray, where we'll be talking today. The Sane Foundation, which is also in that area, right by Sunray. M Health Fairview and Ladine Law, St. Paul Federal Credit Union, which is at Conway as well. St. Paul Port Authority, I don't see Tanya yet on the call, but she's intending to come. Highway Federal Credit Union, Koo Yang is on the call, give a wave, Koo from Highway. Metropolitan State University, Sunrise Banks, and Walters Recycling and Refuse. So these are our partners in the annual sponsor category that help us put on awesome things like we're doing today. And as many of you know, we're doing a conversation every week. So Thursdays from 2:30 to 3:30, your dance card is full with fantastic news from the East Side. So join us. We've got lots of great things in store. Let's start with a police update. Senior Commander, just want to welcome Senior Commander Kurt Hallstrom to give us a read on what's new on the East Side regarding our crime trends and stats, and we can have a little conversation right here at the top of the hour. Go ahead, Commander.
I don't have a video camera turned on, so you just have to hear my beautiful voice. So what to report? I don't know. I can't remember. I don't think I joined you last week. Did I?
No.
No. Well, just to give you an update on where I've been, I got COVID 3 weeks ago now, I guess. So I'm technically a COVID head now, and I can wear that with pride, I guess. So I was out for almost 2 weeks, week and a half with that, and we had, a significant outbreak of that in our department, and thus we've sort of circled the wagons on our community meetings and things like that, and we'll reassess come November to see where we are. But we are not immune. Apparently, I thought I was, just because I'm a cop, but no, sir. Crime on the East Side hasn't changed much. We are seeing typical some downtrends and things as the cooler weather comes in. Unfortunately, we don't have kids back to school, so that hasn't helped us there. I will say, do not leave your car to warm up unattended out in the community. It will get stolen, not guaranteed, but there's a pretty good chance of it. So don't do that. Help us out with that. I think Paris, you were on the unsheltered community meeting last night.
Yes.
There was I think there was close to 65 or so people on that meeting. I thought it was very informative and good. I think now that I'm hoping that everybody has an understanding of how the city is going to attempt to address the unsheltered is a monumental task. And no matter how many beds are provided, we'll never probably have enough. And then some people just don't want to go in. So we're working closely with the mayor and the county, and we hope to find and get all of the Phelan Drive or Phelan Lake encampment in shelter really soon. So other than that, we're just staying status quo. The week of the election, you might see an operational stance change in our operations, depending upon what happens. We're going to have additional officers assigned all over the city. We won't be at the polling stations. Actually, the Minnesota law prohibits us from being there, and we have to be invited into a polling location by a election official. But we will have additional resources. If you paid attention to the national narrative, it's interesting, scary if you spend too much time on the internet and watching the news. I suspect we've had 200 years of elections, and my gut tells me it's going to come and go and be fine. But we are prepared. We have many contingencies in place, and I'll leave it with that, because that'll then go right into your civil unrest conversation further throughout the discussion. And I will remain on. I'm going to go on mute. So if you have any questions, just holler at me, but I will be here through the duration.
Fantastic, Senior Commander. Thank you. Commander Hallstrom mentioned the meeting that was held last night in District 5. The Community Council held a roundtable on civil unrest. And just in way of summary, I'll mention one thing about that because it came up in our meeting last week. Thomas Herr from Hmong Village said, hey, I am trying to figure out who I call and who's responding and how we do this in an appropriate and respectful way. And so, Commander, I would just ask, one of the things I'd like to see in the chat before we're done here, and I've got one of these resources, is who should businesses call? If they've got a life kind of, okay, I understand if there is a life-threatening situation, you call 911. I mean, period. You think somebody's going to get hurt or you see a crime being committed, you go ahead and call 911, the police respond. But I know, Senior Commander, that you're trying not to engage in just kind of a general, we're responding to homelessness and the unsheltered and unhoused. If you've got an encampment close to your place and you're concerned about people, especially now that it's cold, I think the recommendation is that you call somebody else. And that the deputy mayor was, well, let's just say she was laser fine pointer on this one. Like the city is responding. They are working really hard to figure out how to house everybody. They are connecting to everyone who's in a tent. And I think the question that some of our businesses have asked is, who should we call if we want to, be on the right side of that and get some support for some of the people that we see who are hurting right here next to our place, or who are causing an issue maybe right here next to our place that's not life-threatening. What's the phone number you want us to dial? Senior Commander, do you have a sense of who that is we should be calling?
Yep. So I actually, after the meeting, I found out, I talked to Mr. Herr, Thomas, and went and I think I talked to him on Thursday, I think it was. So it all depends upon if it's public or private property. If it's public property, which is owned by the business, you can trespass, and you have the right to tell people they can't be on your property. So I've addressed that, and we've worked that out with the Hmong Village security, and they're aware of what they should do. So if it's a situation like that, they will dial 291-1111, and obviously we don't come out and we're not going to arrest anybody. We're going to try to encourage them to go elsewhere. The encampment that he's referring to is technically on city property. So then that opens up a different book, so to speak, to what we have to follow. DSI is the city agency that's responsible for managing and keeping track of the unsheltered in the city of St. Paul. So 266-889 would be a number that if what we're afraid of is we're afraid that any city property that anybody that just pops up a tent on is now going to become an encampment. And we don't want that, because we want to be able to provide resources and point these people in direction of mental health and drug rehab and healthcare and food and shelter and water and the many of the necessities that people need in our community. So our goal is not to have an encampment or the encampment by the compost site or the one of several dozen that are spattered across the east side. 6 in Mons would be another one. The goal is to get them closer to downtown, so we do have that cold snap that people will be within walking distance of services. So that kind of explains it. On private property, the police department is the number to call. On city property, it's the DSI 268-989, and they also have a email address. If you just went and Google like City of St. Paul, Department of Safety and Inspections, their homepage should pop up.
Okay.
But I think as a group, to the message that everybody received yesterday was more along the lines of, don't be afraid to engage with them, the unsheltered. They're not, contrary to what people believe, they're not scoping out your children. They're not typically the ones that we see are doing the catalytic converter thefts or doing the garage burglaries and things like that. Yeah, they might steal some stuff from foods or things like that, which is acceptable, but in the overall scheme of things, they're not driving our statistics in our communities. Are they alarming to see all of a sudden, boom, there's 15 tents where you used to walk a dog every night after work? Yeah, but they're people. And for the most part, I think just about every unsheltered person in the city of St. Paul has been contacted by an outreach specialist. We haven't had the capacity. Hopefully Bethesda will help us out with that. And then as other places start to open up, COVID has cut the numbers of beds available for shelter well in half. And, it's just, right. It's much more complex than just kicking them out of there, because what we found is when the city said we're done with this one here at 35E and Kellogg, all of those people popped up over on East Drive. Not all of them, a lot of them. So instead of just using the bubble as what we say here in the police department, let's kind of really focus on getting them into shelter. And that's what the deputy mayor wants to do, and support that 100%.
Thank you, Senior Commander.
So I dropped. I apologize.
No. Thank you very much. It was a very you humanized that answer just so well. I appreciate that. That certainly was the approach of the deputy mayor last night. And here's the answer that I wanted in the chat right now, and I think I've got it accurate so people can take it down. 651-291-1111. That's the police non-emergency number for non-emergencies on private property. On public land, we want to call DSI 651-266-8989. And DSI was on the call last night. In fact, there were 5 or 6 people from the city. They're working on being super responsive, but they're facing an issue where there just aren't enough beds to bring people into at the moment, just as you mentioned, Senior Commander. So anyway, more to come on this issue. Let's shift gears to introductions and civil unrest, because you're right. You did allude to that perfectly. We are headed for, big peak events coming in our community in the next couple of weeks here. So could those spur civil unrest? It's possible, of course. We're going to shift to that, but right now what I'd love for you all to do is turn on your camera if you've got one, and come into gallery view here where you can see all 11 or so folks on the call. And let's just do some brief introductions for who's part of this conversation today. Okay, so Jenna and Molly, we can't see you necessarily, but you may not have, I'll introduce you as we kind of go through here, since we may not be able to see you waving.
I'm working on it.
Okay, no problem. If you are a small business owner on the east side of St. Paul, give us a wave here. There's Doug from Culver's and Darren Varley and Molly Murphy from Brunson's. Thanks for that. If you work with a nonprofit on the east side and are part of the nonprofit community, wave there. Okay, now you are not Elaine. I know you're not Elaine, but you're in for Elaine and the Hazel Park Learning Center. Are you Mary Russell?
I am Mary Russell.
Okay. And I can see that now right there on the screen.
Yeah.
So fantastic.
Just a quick comment too on the previous conversation about homelessness.
Sure.
Compass, which is part of the Wilder Foundation, who does a lot of studies, they did a study on what East Side communities have been most impacted by the pandemic, looking at the highest job loss and housing cost burden. And a housing cost burden is when you spend more than 30% of your income on housing costs.
Right.
Two of the highest zip codes are 55106 and 55119. So thought I'd share that with y'all.
Thank you. Are we surprised? Anybody surprised about that on the east side? Nobody. David, not even Chicago's surprised. Okay. Right. So if you are a part of a bank and work on the east side, give us a quick wave. I'm talking to you, Koo, but I can't get your attention. There, give us a wave. That's Koo from Highway. Glad you're on the call, Koo. If you're a realtor on the east side and you live close to Darren Varley, there's Patrick Rubel, president of the St. Paul Realtors Association. Glad to have you on, Patrick. And we've got Jenna McCullough from Councilmember Yang's office. Great to have you on the call as well. Okay, that's us. So let's shift gears. Let's talk about civil unrest. I wanted to start this conversation actually with Erika. And Erika, if you would give us a little context for just what happened at Sunray and what you felt like you learned. And then we'll shift to David and talk. So just briefly, why David Alarcon is a part of this conversation is basically what I'd love for you to talk just a little bit about, Erika, for a couple minutes. Welcome, Erika Bennett from Brixmor and Sunray.
Hi, everyone. So I am the property manager at Sunray. And with that, I kind of oversee tenant operations, the parking lot, common areas, which all were very much affected from the riots in May.
Where's the remote?
Sorry, 1 second here. And with that, we thought it might be helpful to run through what we've learned and how that's helping us prepare for some of the future occurrences. We've gone through a lot of insurance processes with our own insurance carrier and also working with some of the tenants. And we couldn't have done it without our security consultant, David, who really walked us through kind of the pre-riot, during the riot, and now really helping us get a plan to harden our center and to prepare for these future events. And I think, there's a lot that I learned from what went on, but one thing that I hope that all of you can take away from today is that if you can be prepared, there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of be ready for some of these. So I know David has a really good presentation put together, so I'm going to pass it over to him.
Thanks, Erika. David, welcome to the show. Also, just want to say welcome, Dr. Bruce Corey, and Molly Murphy is back, but she's in the Caribbean. So anyway, that's good. It's always nice to be in the Caribbean if you're Molly. I'd go to the Caribbean. Okay, David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I have a quick PowerPoint presentation, and I'm trying to make this a little bit interactive. So if I could share my screen.
So I'm going to make you the host, David, and then you'll be able to share your screen. And you'll just want to make me the host again, or you'll have to watch the waiting room too. Okay, so you should be able to share now.
So crisis management, I'll give you a little bit of background. First of all, I want to thank Commander Holstrom for putting me in contact with this great organization. I have a background in municipal government. I've worked in municipal government for 24 years. And during those roles, I've also served dual roles as emergency manager in the Chicagoland area. Been through a lot of scenarios, been through a lot of training classes. Unfortunately, for this incident that happened back in May, we put all of the education and all of the practice into play. So we'll go through. This is a quick introduction of what we do, what the company does. Munisupport is made up of individuals who are retired or currently serve municipal roles in various agencies. Give you a quick rundown on crisis management. Crisis is an incident human caused or natural that requires urgent attention and action to protect life and property. Crisis management is an application of strategies designed to help an organization deal with the sudden and significant negative event. The goals of crisis management, is to seek and minimize damage of a crisis which it may cause. Crisis management practices are engaged before, during, and after crisis. So you have three steps. You have the pre-crisis, you have the crisis response, and the post-crisis. One of the things that I think would be very useful for the group is to dissect this and actually go through one of the scenarios. And one of the scenarios would be the post-crisis debriefing. And this gives the opportunity for the groups that are involved in a crisis an opportunity to talk about their experience and also identify the lessons learned in the area and improve any future responses. Oops, sorry. So what I was thinking is to engage the group and start talking about the possible, what were the impacts to the members of the East Side area business associations. I don't know how we could, if someone that was affected can speak to their experience.
Yeah, so we've got a couple folks on the call. I asked Molly to come on and talk a little bit about responses on Payne Avenue. So Molly, do you want to start with that? And then other folks can jump in too. Wait, David, is that all right?
Sure.
Yeah. So what my experience was right after everything happened in May was that so Brunson started, well, actually as Brunson's and as the president of PABA, I just started to get kind of calls and communication going around about what can we do, what's going on. You know, just obviously a lot of people were confused and questions and scared and all that. So then what we ended up happening was we all just kind of met on Payne Avenue and started boarding up businesses. So it was a really organic, natural thing that happened. And there were people kind of involved in helping, you know, directing people to where we were. And you know, it was great attempts of coordinating. There was obviously, you know, some of that didn't work out as good as it could have, but I guess where I'm going with all this, we came together as a local community to try to do, you know, what we thought was right measures to protect ourselves. I missed a chunk there, but I know some gal was talking about, you know, if you can, you know, protect yourselves. That was just what we did, and it ended up being all, you know, for the most part, all for naught. You know, nobody got any damage. Either people were deterred by the boards, or it was never going to happen anyway. But in the moment when it was going on, you know, in hindsight, it definitely built some, you know, just some strength in the community and working together and things like that, which was, you know, a glimmer of something, you know, positive and nice in the heat of all the ickiness that was going on. And so so one of the things I kind of take away from that is there definitely could be more, a better way to deal with that. I mean, I personally was getting phone calls and texts and trying to help and didn't know if there was a more streamlined kind of process to have some sort of communication, or, a point person or whatever, that would probably be really beneficial for that type of a situation.
Thanks, Molly. There were several businesses on Payne Avenue that had some looting, as well as up in the Cedar Square Shopping Center as well. But you're right, by and large, Sunray was the epicenter of the damage on the east side. Doug, your business is right next to Sunray. Did you have an experience up on that side of the east side as well? You're still muted, Doug. Let me see if I can unmute. No, I can't. Can you unmute yourself, Dougie?
There we go. All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we were very fortunate. At that particular time, our dining room was not open, which I think actually saved us, because we did have some of the people that were doing the looting at Sunray kind of congregated in our parking lot for a short period of time. And I think they may have wanted to come in, but very fortunately, our dining room was not open for business at that time. But we were so fortunate the only impact I had was that we did, by the advice of the police department, we closed early that day, so we lost revenue. But it was a peace of mind thing to make sure that the kids got home safely, and that, no one was at risk. And so, yeah, I just feel very, very fortunate that we came out of it very unscathed. And my heart goes out to the businesses in Sunray and the ones that were, well, Minneapolis, of course, too. So,
right. So just as an overall report, we reached out and connected with 26 businesses that were damaged in Unrest on the east side. So there were Sunray businesses, there were some Payne Avenue and Arcade businesses, there were some Greater East Side businesses that were damaged. But you're right, it wasn't the swath of destruction that we saw on University even. That was our experience as a whole, as a business association, kind of watching it roll out. I loved seeing groups come together and start trying to figure out how to hurricane-proof their businesses and do it quickly. We saw that on 7th Street, on White Bear Avenue, on Payne Avenue, on Arcade. So people did, they gathered together, they joined up after they watched the burning start in Minneapolis, and they just put boards on everything. So that's part of the impact that we witnessed and saw.
And I think overall, as everybody starts taking a look at what to do next to prepare for basically what potentially could happen, Molly, I think what your group did was phenomenal. And basically what you've already started, even though you winged it, nothing was in writing, you formed this organization and you started to develop your own crisis management plan of how you're going to be responding. And that is the important step. And I think this is the reason why I wanted to go through this exercise, to hear from what was done. My suggestion would be for this organization to start building on that experience and the collaborative efforts to monitor the situations, to go ahead and start collaborating with contractors to be able to respond in a reasonable amount of time. During all of during the issues, the question was always asked, where are the police? The police, and later in the slide, I'm going to just give you a breakdown, and Commander Holstrom, please feel free to jump in. I think as business owners, everybody needs to take as many steps as possible to protect their businesses, to provide less reliance on police to respond. And the issue is that there's other more serious crimes that are happening all over the city. And for a proper response, you need adequate resources. And a lot of times, especially in the incident that happened on May 28th, it's next near impossible to have enough resources to handle as many emergencies that were going on all at the same time. Molly, I think those preventative steps that you've taken is the core for maybe your organization developing that plan. So everything's in writing. Everything's in writing. You have the contact information, not only to the police dispatch center, but who's your contractor? Who are you going to call? And having multiple people with that information to be able to respond in case you're not around or in case you're dealing with another emergency. Has anybody else developed a plan or kind of documented a response to anything that's coming in the future potentially?
It doesn't look like it.
Okay. You know, that's something with that plan. If you guys start writing something up, my organization will be able to help you. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, we can definitely help you. I think you've already started on the core to come up with the crisis management plan. And it would be great for the collaborative efforts for everybody in this association to be able to have a document to give them some guidance. And I'm hoping that as we present more in this presentation, you'll be able to take away some ideas as well.
Great. Yep. Perfect.
So, and Erika, please feel free to jump in as we talk about the Sunray experience. I was retained by the Brixmor Property Group to take a look at some issues that the Sunray Shopping Center was having. One of the biggest things that we've now, after a year of being able to look at all the data, taking a look at the activities on the shopping center, the biggest issue that Sunray is facing is perception. Taking a look at the police calls for service at the Sunray Shopping Center isn't anything different than of any other urbanized shopping center in the country. And Commander, please jump in if you see fit. So for the last year, we just did a yearly report on the number of service calls, and I could share those numbers with everyone later. They're low. The perceived crime is all perceived. Part of the security evaluations that we did is we actually went and we met with the tenants of Sunray to get their feedback. And one of the things that some of them said is that they just felt sometimes unsafe. But when the question was asked, why do you feel unsafe? Is it because of something, an incident that you personally experienced, or is it something that you heard? I couldn't have one person respond of an incident that they were involved in. It was all things that they've heard talking to other people or from social media. As part of the contract, we also changed security companies, and we also contracted out with the city of St. Paul for police officers on overtime details. The reason why we did that, it's not so much that there was a need. We saw it to reassure people that it was a safe and keep it a safe and welcoming environment for people because of that perception. That takes us to May 28th. May 28th, we were contacted that there might be potential problems. I'm sorry, before May 28th, we notified Brixmor potential problems because of the George Floyd incident. So between us and between Brixmor, one of the things that we did is we made sure that the contact list for all the tenants, we had all their updated contact list to be able to communicate with them. And also Brixmor ended up getting in contact with their cleanup and board up company to make sure that they were on standby in case they were needed. Unfortunately, on May 28th, they were needed. This whole incident, the police department, in our opinion, did a great job by notifying the tenants to close down because of the potential threat. A few minutes later, after the majority of the businesses closed, there was an incident where people started to come in and started to loot the different businesses. This was monitored. By several Brixmor staff and also myself through their camera system as we monitored it live. Also during the incident, we were monitoring the situation through the City of St. Paul has a really good program, the emergency notification system. That's really important for us to monitor. And the reason being is it gives you update on what's happening. And most importantly, any changes to any ordinances. For example, the curfews. the mandatory curfews that went into effect. So we made sure that we communicated with the businesses, letting them know the curfew in case it affected their hours of operations, if they did indeed remain open. We coordinated with public safety agencies. It took about 30 minutes for the police department to have enough resources on the property to start taking control back of the property. Keep in mind, we needed to communicate with them, because once a business has been looted, that business needs to be inspected. The police need to go in there to make sure it's clear, making sure that no one else is in there before your board up crews start boarding up the properties. So we were coordinating with the Ramsey County Ramsey County Dispatch Center to see what the police were doing, and when we had the all clear to go in and start the cleanup efforts and the board up service. During all this time, we were also communicating with tenants, providing them support services and support information, and coordinating the cleanup efforts. So after that incident, what we've been doing is we had a debriefing, sort of a little bit larger than we just talked about. We had debriefing with everyone that was involved. And based on that debriefing, we started to develop a plan of how we're going to deal with the next incident. Not only social unrest, but any incident that could possibly interrupt normal business operations at the center. As part of that plan, we were also searching for social media, videos on social media, which we found quite a lot. And we watched those videos to develop a plan, this hardening plan that you see the last point, a hardening plan. Where was the shopping center vulnerable? Where were the people coming in from? What parts do we need to pay attention to secure? So we ended up wrapping up, and we're in the process of finalizing this crisis management plan. The crisis management plan, it's from lessons learned from this incident, but also it brings to the table, and COVID brings a very unique aspect to this. I don't know if you've seen with natural disasters, usually governments will set up an emergency operations center where everybody from every single municipal department is on that table. So if a decision needs to be made on the spot, you have those decision makers on there. So we designed one virtually we're in the process of finalizing using Microsoft Teams. The important part is when you have an incident happening and you're managing this incident, it's important for you to have all the contact information, but also the decision makers to make sure that the proper decisions are made without any delays. Especially with business owners, protecting your property. You might not be on that property, but I think it's important for your employees to have access so those decisions could be made. In part of our hardening plan, I wanted to share an emergency access restriction plan. So if you see from, we're going to be closing in case, so I guess I'll start with, once we end up seeing that there's a potential threat, and we verify that as a potential threat, we would be closing the shopping center access down. So we would be closing access A would be completely closed down. We would have access B, which would be completely open. As you go down to access C, that would be closed. These access drives would be closed as well. And we would remove the access from F to only an exit. The reason why we developed this plan was to make sure that if an incident like the one on May 28th happened, we rely less on police resources to block off all these entrances. So this plan calls for 4,000-pound barriers, construction barriers that you see on the highway. These are going to be staged within the next few weeks. If we identify that there's a threat, the company that we're using will come out within an hour and set those in place. Some of the key things to consider when doing something like this is liability. One of the things that we did is we started off with the conversation with the police department. Will this plan work to minimize the resources in case we have another event like this at the shopping center? We had great cooperation, and it was approved with no issues. The next step was to go to the city. We needed to make sure that the fire department had proper access. We needed to make sure that they didn't have any issues with the plan as well. We received their approval as well. Key thing is using life safety codes, making sure that fire equipment can access the parking lot from the front and can exit through the back. There'll be a minimum of 20 feet opening in access F to make sure that all their fire equipment can go in and out. Once we determine that the threat no longer exists, the company will come out and reopen all the entrances, still staging the equipment there. It's our plan to have that equipment stationed there until after the court proceedings for those officers involved with the George Floyd death. Does anybody have any questions about this plan before I change the slide?
It's a great visual. So here's my question. At access D closed driveway and access E closed driveway, you're not talking about closing the street. That's Doug's property right there next, that's Doug sitting in his living room right there at Culver's. So you're not talking about closing the street here. What is that? Are those, it says driveway. I'm not familiar with, is that a curb cut or something there?
It's a curb cut going onto the driveway, going onto a driveway, but it is on the Sunray property across the street from Culver's.
You're not closing this street. You're closing that.
No.
Okay, I got it. This is great. And one of the things that I think made a big difference was access to a parking lot, which meant 150 people could come and park over here in the midst of a riot. That'll be different for every other member on the east side. I wonder if the police would work with us on what do you do on a corridor where you're worried about people accessing and parking when basically it's a big street that we're talking about and a bunch of little parking lots. That'd be a different conversation, I would imagine. David, you handle that differently, I bet.
It all depends. It all depends on the access. The one key thing based on your question is that none of the equipment to close off the parking lot is on city property. It's all on private property. When it comes to closing off, especially streets, it's going to be a little bit harder, and it's going to take quite a process to get it approved through the city.
Yep, got it. It also sounds like you had some issues getting things approved through the city, which, I won't take a show of hands for who's had problems getting things done with the city. We just won't go there. But did you kind of iron out a pathway for, like, if we wanted to talk with somebody at the city, who do we talk to who would go like, oh yeah, we know what you're talking about? Erika or David?
I think I've had, yes, when we started, and sometimes when you deal with government, I work in government right now, and I've worked in government for a long time. It's very challenging. But it's one thing when you go before government, I think you need to do your research. Before we presented this to the city, we made sure that it met the life safety codes, because that was going to be a big issue. And we made sure that any restrictions or any equipment that was not going to be on the city's right of way. We did have some issues, and the issues, it was not so much that they were making it difficult. Everybody, once it goes from department to department, sometimes government loses insight on what the purpose is, what the intent really is for here. But we have, in everything that we tried to do at Sunray, we've had two really good advocates. We've had Commander Holstrom. He's been tremendous. And we have Alderwoman Prince. Those two have always guided us to the right direction of who we should talk to, instead of spending a few hours trying to figure out what department do I need permission from.
Got it. That makes sense. And those folks are resources on the ground for any business on the east side. So that makes sense. That answers my question.
So yeah, any other questions regarding this? oops, sorry. So we ended up coming up with this plan also, just, I'm sorry, based on watching the videos. You know, we watched people coming in. There's some really good videos on YouTube. Someone was flying a drone over Sunray as this was happening. So we were actually able to watch this happen and be able to use those videos in order to assist us in planning. There's other issues that that we're still working on. There's issues with that we're working on with the Sunray Bowl because there was a lot of congregation up on the hill as well. But that's all work in progress as well. But this basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it less, I guess, less accessible. When people drive through here, we want the message to be, oh, it's going to be a little bit more challenging. So let's move on to to the target that's less fortified. The other big important thing too, lessons learned, is making sure that your back doors are labeled properly. Not so much with your business name, but making sure that your address is on all of your rear entrances. Because what ends up happening is you get a call that there's something happening in your business, and usually they're going to run out the back door. If your rear entrances or your rear access doors are not labeled properly, the police are going to have to guess which one is the address. And based on experience, you'll drive up on the call and you'll be the one going in the back, and you'll see the guy running out the back door from your rearview mirror. You missed them because you couldn't really figure out which one was the address, which door was to the address where the call was coming from.
That makes sense.
The other thing too is take a look at trying to, as much as possible, Jimmy-proof your rear entrances. That's also very important. It's a very minimal cost. But again, are you going to keep people from breaking in? No. Are you going to make it more challenging? Yes. And for them, it's get in and get out as fast and grab whatever you can and get out as fast as you can. So all of these small things and minimal investments are just going to make it a little bit more challenging for people, and a less desirable target.
Nice. Makes sense.
Insurance policies. My partner was going to be on here, but unfortunately he had another commitment. Business owners need to audit their existing insurance policies and talk to their agents about it. Sorry. And Erika, I know you know a lot more than this than I do. If you could jump in whenever you see fit.
Yeah, well, we are just wrapping up our insurance process actually from May, and actually are pleasantly surprised. A lot of the riot related damage is covered by our insurance policy. And so I think, you know, going through this, we had tenants that were all responsible for their broken windows and the loss of merchandise, but our policy ended up covering our preventative board services and also a security consultant, and all of David's efforts through all of this. And then some of the other typical things like graffiti removal, and we had a few trash cans that were used as projectiles that were also covered by insurance. So I think that's really important to point out too, if you're working with building owners, that there are items that can be covered under their policies that are really more of a preventative item, like the board up services, or maybe just pre-ordering some of that plywood for future events. Yeah, I'm sure I'll have more insurance comments as you go through this, but it's something that's really come to light. I know people were having issues because riots are excluded in some policies, but we did have luck with our insurance policy.
Right. Most business owner policies contain provisions which will cover unrest and riots, but vary in degree, like Erika said. So right now is a very good time to get a meeting together with your insurance agent and and really hammer down and get a good summary of what your coverages are. Business owners might opt in on certain coverages under many policies, like Erika said, with glass coverage. Owners need to assess whether or not their business income coverage is available and worth the investment based on the risk of a prolonged shutdown. And then tenants and landlord need to communicate as to overlapping coverages and determine which carrier has the liability for events like rioting. Anything to add on that, Erika?
You know, I know some of our tenants are having issues getting coverage for riot-related business interruption. And I think that's what you were talking about, is opting into that. So, you know, the merchandise was covered, the actual damage to their glass was covered, but a few of them are having issues getting, you know, all of the time that it took to kind of get their store back up and running and covering the rent for those periods. And so that, you know, I guess it's not an overlapping coverage, but just something that I've heard back from our tenants that they were surprised they didn't have, their business interruption didn't cover an event like this.
Makes sense that checking, you know, what this makes me want out of this, David, as a follow-up, and I don't know how much more you have in terms of presentation. I know we're kind of coming toward the end of our time. Is I think it would make sense for business owners to have a checklist of things that they should be checking on and thinking about as a result of some of this learning. That would be one thing that we could put together as a part of our emergency crisis management plan for the organization. You know, like every member could look through this checklist and work through some of these things. And this insurance question would be huge on that, I would think.
And I'm just about done here. Lease information. If you're leasing property, tenants and landlords need to review their lease to determine who has the duty to mitigate damages in the event of rioting and property damage. And again, Erika, jump in if you see fit. Leases should address the duty to make preventative measures, if any. And tenants and landlords should be aware of affirmative requirements to board up or secure premises before, during, and after the civil unrest. And I know that was a question that was raised while we had the looting happening at Sunray, the authority and what the lease actually say about a mandatory shutdown based on an emergency by the municipality.
So I think really quick, I'll jump in there. Us as a landlord, it was really important to not make a mandate for tenants to shut down, just because that does open you up to some liability if we are affecting business hours. So at Sunray, we relied on the city and the police department to really direct some of the closings and the recommendations to cease operations of the businesses.
And then as we start planning, or as a group starts planning, just one thing to consider is the size of the city, which is 56.2 square miles, the population 307,695. Most importantly, the size of the police department, which is only 600 officers. So you have one officer to 512 residents. So I think we need to keep that into consideration when we do all of our planning. Even in municipal emergency management, even the most smallest, according to FEMA, the most smallest community has to be self-sufficient in a natural disaster for the first 48 hours before the federal government or anybody else comes in to provide assistance. So as you're planning for any future unrest or any weather-related issue, I think you need to keep the resources of the city in mind. Protecting your building, we touched a little bit about the public safety and city information. I would recommend for everybody to download and to get signed up for the City of St. Paul Emergency Notification System. A great way of getting information without having to go through social media and verifying if it's real or not. You have to be very cautious about any posting you see on social media. And Paris, I'll send you all these links, so you have them and you could share with everybody. When you talk about securing a building, the best resource that I found in order for you not to even for me to go through everything is the Building Owners and Managers Association International. They have phenomenal information. I'll share the link with you. They'll take you on a building checklist of how to properly secure for your building.
I love it. Yes, this is exactly the kind of thing that I think we want. And to put a kind of a resource plan, pamphlet, a planning guide together for businesses to take a look. And then for associations like PABA, the Payne Arcade Business Association, and the SABA, we can work together to help figure out where the shared resources can be. Like you mentioned, are there contractor services that we could recommend to members? Like, hey, you got to find your own board up contractor. Here are 4 or 5 that were active in the last one. We know they did a really nice job. Those would be fantastic things that we could put together as a part of kind of an info packet.
And another thing for resource is security. Security is very expensive. But the City of St. Paul has great programs to hire on off-duty or on-duty police officers. Something where you can, and you would have to check with them, have a police officer visit all your locations. If everybody chips in and you have a police officer to visit all the locations of your members within the district.
I love it.
It's definitely a possibility, and it really cuts down on the cost.
Totally something that I think we should look into. Challenging, but easier for a Payne and Arcade, say, because they're all right there together, versus 5 corridors, you know. But anyway, that's just part of what we think about recommending for groups of businesses. Maybe Sunray, I mean, you could probably get together with Doug and Jorge and Juan and David and Remy and Ken Wong right there in your area and say, like, yeah, we could boost security for all these businesses. We have like 10 businesses right there that could go in together.
And one of the methods which the police department has been really good in, one of the things why it was important, and we really try to bring in the officers from that particular district to come in and work the overtime, is because we want to make sure that the relation building continues. When you have an officer that's assigned to that beat, and that after work, he starts his new shift at the shopping center, he's visiting he's visiting the tenants, he's building those relationships, and those relationships are going to go far and beyond, to the point where even when they're on regular duty, they're going to stop in. And when there's a problem, that relationship is going to benefit them because they already know each other. They're not just the beat officer that's just driving by the shopping center. No, they're engaging.
That's great. I will speak for our members when I say, David, that is exactly what we've been advocating and asking for. Our members would love that if officers would stop in, get a cup of coffee, meet the owner, make that connection. If we can help facilitate more of that as a result of this crisis planning, that would be fantastic. And Commander Holstrom will be very happy to work with you on how we could make that kind of thing happen.
So finally, I'll send out my information.
Fantastic.
Anything that we can do to help you. I think especially with Molly, I think she has the core concept. My staff will be more than happy to assist you to develop that plan.
And she's in the Caribbean, so you know you get to leave the winter, David. So there you go. Nice. So I also wanted to say welcome, Councilmember Prince. Glad to have you on the call here. You joined as we were kind of rolling through. And just to say, David, he just said, look, his phone number is your phone number for for how we manage getting some of this done. And if folks have questions that we're kind of working with the city around, we're going to put together some notes based on the conversation today, but it sounds like you would be a fantastic resource, you and Nelsie Yang's office, Councilmember Yang's office, for helping us figure out if businesses need any more direction to city departments.
Absolutely. And I want to thank David to bring this kind of expertise to us in St. Paul, and having gone through the civil unrest at Sunray. David is providing top-notch consulting to us for, you know, out of a civic feeling of civic responsibility. So thank you for that, David. Thank you to Erika and Brixmor. I feel like we have been really lucky to develop a partnership with Brixmor and with David and Munisupport that we didn't know 2 years ago when we all put our heads together on how to make Sunray better, that we would be coming to rely on each other so much as a result of the civil unrest. So just thank you, and thanks for being such a great partner in all of this.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
So just, we're wrapping up. What I want to ask anyone to do here is to go ahead and drop into the chat any questions that you have outstanding for the group and for this conversation. Like I said, we'll commit to giving, to putting a summary together and thinking about what would businesses need to think about to get this done. I just dropped into the chat a couple of upcoming announcements. There's a meeting that Visit St. Paul is convening on November 16th called Designing the Future of Restaurants. It's going to be a great roundtable, and our restaurant members should participate if you can. So check that out. And then the Equity Summit that the St. Paul Chamber is putting together tomorrow is going to be a blast. I mean, it's going to be about equity. These are serious issues for sure, but T. Michael Rambo is the facilitator, and he's a fantastic, kind of amazing person to witness at work. So I also put a donate link in for Asaba if you want to throw a couple dollars in the hat. You know, like, I need a new hat. So there's that. We're all working on surviving this COVID thing. But any other announcements before we sign off, or questions, please drop them right in the chat, and I'll pick up the chat before I close the meeting. Thank you, David, for putting in your contact information. Thanks for being with us. And thank you, Erika, for your great work. Any announcements about things upcoming? I'm seeing none. Okay, we'll have another fantastic meeting similar to this next week, and we'll be talking about improving upgrades and opportunities, really, in the midst of this kind of strange economic season. So thanks for being a part. Check on the Asaba calendar for more details, and we'll wish you a fabulous afternoon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Paris. Thanks, Asaba.
You're sure welcome.
I got to figure out how to give you back control.
Oh yeah, you do, because I can't actually copy the chat. So you go up to me, to my name, and hit more, and then you can say, make me the host.
I didn't watch the YouTube on this.
Yeah, I know. It's under participants. Do you see us? We're the three left, you and me and Koo.
Can't put you in the waiting room.
Don't put me in the waiting room, man. You have to let me back in. You see, if you just hover over my name, you'll see more.
Trying here. Yeah, I see stop video, make host. Oh, there you go.
Okay, thank you, man.
Great, thank you.
Look forward to your visit next week. Whenever you're coming, bring your boots.
Bye.
Bye.